Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the May 28th Board of Education hearing for the budget adoption. This is our public hearing, and can we begin, please, with the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge of allegiance
to the flag
of
the United
States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And I also have a motion, please, to move out of executive session.
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry, the first was Mike Alt.
Yes.
We're sharing with a lot of people on the screen. Okay. And all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. The second item before we get started is an add to our agenda. We want to add a superintendent's report under regular business so that Carmen can speak to some of the information that we feel is important for community members to hear and that they may be anxious to hear about. Although we know there are no answers from the governor regarding many issues that still loom out there, to hear from our superintendent may be reassuring to some. So can we have a motion, please, to amend the agenda?
So moved.
By Sue, second by Maria. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And with that, we'll turn it over to Brian to lead us through the public budget hearing.
All righty, thank you.
Thank you.
Get my screen ready to share. All right, Cindy, if you want to.
Sorry.
No problem. All righty, here you let me. Can everybody see that title slide? We good?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much. So tonight is the public hearing on our school budget for 2020-21. We're just 22 days later than what we had initially thought when we started the budget process way back in the fall. Just want to start off and focus on a couple positives that are going on in the district. Our graduation rate last year was 95%. Once again, for the 15th time, we were named top music community. And we're currently in the 4th year of implementing that whole child mindfulness curriculum into the district. So some positive things to talk about. But I think really this year, especially what we're really proud of is, starting that one-to-one student device initiative, I think gave us a huge leg up on adjusting and adapting to the COVID closure and the remote learning that took place. So we're in the 4th year of that. So proud to shine a light on that. And then another thing that we've been doing right along is we're currently up to roughly 800 breakfasts and 800 lunches daily for Webster students at the drive-through service. Happening right now over at Schrader. So just a couple things we want to start on a positive note as we dig into this budget hearing. Now, obviously, the huge factor influencing the budget right now is the coronavirus pandemic and the state's deficit. This led to a lot of talk about freeze on state aid for schools and additional cuts, 10 to 20% possible. If we do not get federal stimulus aid, which is out there, the governor has touted that significantly, which is one of the reasons why I think we don't have a lot of our data yet, even though we've missed a couple of those Friday afternoons where we thought it'd be released. I think the state is delaying to see what the federal government does. And like I shared last time we met, could be anywhere between $5–10 million in state aid. Don't know for sure, but we've been able to balance this budget without making major program reductions or layoffs to staff. But we'll have to take a look at this if that bullet point above becomes true in that $5 to $10 million range. But we're going to present a budget that's within the tax cap. and anticipate state support is reduced, we'll make necessary reductions to stay within that cap. Because as everybody knows, the success rate of a budget passing that goes above the cap is not very good. But just to kind of focus in too on some other factors that sometimes are getting washed under where we started with this budget, take a minute about special education, because when we were planning and setting up numbers, we realized some of our numbers were spiking for out-of-district private placements. Colleen Armstrong and her team, we took a look at that together starting real early in December of what we could do to kind of help improve this, because it was going to be a significant budget increase if these students went to private placements or BOCES placements. So through some great work transitioning to a new high school program that has a significant amount of savings, but it's exciting because it's also a new program. And anytime you get to have kids be in district, it's better than when you're sending them out. Another one is the pension and benefits. If you think way back, TRS announced an increase into next year because they changed some of their actuarial tables and their outlook long-term, which created a spike in rates. And then our benefits went up significantly. A lot of state mandates around additional requirements that are forced to be covered in New York, so we saw increases there. And then the look-back periods that we got, the 3 periods that will come into the 2021 fiscal year, it will be a huge factor on the budget moving forward. So what this budget accomplished, we're tax cap compliant. I think that's number one, that we were able to do that again. Like I said, no layoffs or major program reductions, and it's really built to withstand those mid-year cuts through spending freezes, reduction in some BOCES programs, and attrition of retirement positions as well. So I think we're in a solid spot to be able to adapt. The total proposed budget is $183,278,876. It's a 3.22% increase over last year, a little over $5.7 million difference. Next up, we're going to talk about the 3-part budget. This is a uniform way for schools to present their budget. Every district has to present their budget in this breakdown. There is some ability, the districts could code some expenses in different spots, so it's not a perfect one-to-one comparison based on if it's an administrative cost or if it's a program cost or if it's capital cost. But for the most part, I'd say everybody is probably around 98% the same when it comes to this. So the 3 components are the administrative. We look at those, that's our back office and central services and those support operational areas, district office, and building administration. So the 11 buildings, all the administrative costs that go with the principals and their offices. The program is, you'll see the largest, that is all the costs associated with direct instruction of students as well as transportation expenses as well. And then capital, facilities maintenance, debt service, and any transfers to the capital fund. An easy breakdown of how we spend our money, 77.5% is on program, administrative is 7.3, and then the capital is 15.2. Capital, a slight increase over last year as a slice of the pie due to some increased debt service, which you'll see coming up. So here's our major administrative budget line items. And you'll see some changes, some differences, increase over last year. You see 80% of that increase is tied to the benefits, which is mainly for this group pension, TRS system. When it comes to administrators are in the TRS system. So you see the pension increase really hit the budget line here. And then the rest is kind of a mixed bag of mandated salary increases, and you see some reductions. One of the things I want to point out too as well, given the kind of the nature of what's been going on in the last year, and we've discussed this a couple times at board meeting, is like, you know, things around the Child Victims Acts and the litigious nature of everything lately. Our insurance reciprocal has been able to maintain a 0 cost increase for us going into next year, in spite of all the pressures that districts and municipalities are facing due to those increased concerns. And, I think the New York State Legislature just extended the look back for Child's Victim Act for another year. So anybody that would like to file a claim has another year to do that for anything that's happened in the past. And our insurance company is aware of this, and they were, most insurance companies would spike your rates expecting districts to get hit with that again, but we're able to maintain flat moving forward. So it's a big part of that relationship with as being part of a consortium reciprocal of New York State schools. Next up is our program budget. You'll see pretty much this is the salaries in all these areas for about 1,300 of our total employees are in the program budget. When you think of all of our recreational staff, our transportation staff, our salaries for athletic stipends, and all our instructional staff across these areas are included in this part of the budget. 44% is the benefits piece. You see the increase there. And I also want to point out, you see on the special education line, that looks like it's larger because as we've gone over before, we have a couple FTEs in there additional for the new program at the high school. And some private placements that we had to see increase for students that were in programs such as Mary Carriola that we had to budget for. But I do want to point out that line item when we were starting this process back in December was at least $1 to $1.2 million higher than it is right now if we did not work to develop that new program at the high school level. So that was a huge cost avoidance. So it's up considerably in comparison to everybody else, to the rest of the program line items. But I just want to highlight that the reason that could have been far higher and would have created a lot more budgetary stress if it wasn't for the work of Colleen and her staff in putting that together as we moved forward. Next up is our capital budget. I'm going to take a minute just to kind of, this is really operations and maintenance, and the staff there, about 150 staff members would be included with their salary increase here and their benefit costs, and our debt service, and then our total transfers to capital. I want to point this out because later when we talk about contingency budget, you notice one of the things that would be mandated under a contingency to be removed is the transfer to capital fund. And a lot of what we do in the operations and maintenance perspective, that is non-mandatory. So if, for example, and we could get in this to a little detail, but just to kind of set it up a little bit. For instance, if we were replacing water fountains with the more efficient water bottle fill-ups, that would become a contingent expense because the water fountains are working fine. We could not allocate the funds to be able to do that. So there's some significant restrictions on what we can spend capital. So I just want you, this is a budget under a contingency that would look different moving forward. So I just want to point that out as we work our way through here. Next up is I want to break down the budget for a couple other kind of more practical matters. The administrative program capital is the state mandate, but I want to give a feel and a look for another view of, so I call this the where. Where are we spending our money in the budget? And the top 5 areas in this pie chart are the instructional budget, benefits, special education, debt service, and buildings and grounds are our top 5. That makes up about 78% of where we spend our money when we look at it this way, and the rest equals the 22%. So this is the where. You see transportation, athletics, pupil services, computer assisted instruction, library, occupational ed, students' tuitions for EMCC, principals, curriculum, operations, and BOCES administrative costs. So that's a different way to look at it. So I always like to point that out. And then to follow it up there next is how we report to the state in another way is what the state calls object area. The easier way to remember is what are we spending our money on? And the top 5 there is really shouldn't be any surprise. Is instructional salaries is number 1. Benefits would be number 2. Non-instructional salaries is 3, which is really the difference between instructional and non-instructional is New York State certified in instructional, non-instructional is civil service salaries and people that fall under those categories. BOCES are total expenditures with BOCES, whether it's technology, special education placements, any other kind of services we do through BOCES is our 4th largest. And then what we spend on debt service and transfers is our 5th. Right there makes up over 92% of the budget. Everything else we spend money on when you think contractuals. So like our resource officers are contractual, or our field trips are contractual. Our energy costs for fuel, heat, electricity, all the supplies. I mean, we spend significant money on school supplies and tuitions for health services and other billings between districts is really only 7.3% of the budget. It's a very small part. So I always just like to show that of what are we spending most of our money on, and really is in 5 huge categories, and the smaller parts of the budget really only make up about 7.3% is what we're spending money and buying on. Next up is our state report card that we share every year. This is, we're planning for 2020-21. This data is on a delay. This is based on 17-18 fiscal reporting and how the state calculates us in comparison to what they call similar districts and then all New York State districts. You see a couple things. Overall, we are below per pupil except in special education. And a lot of that has to do with how they actually calculate special education, I think. So a district of our size, even though we're only about a 9.2% student with disabilities classification rate, we win in volume based on about 8,500 students. So even a percentage of those students going to high cost placements is going to drive our special education costs significantly higher. So just something I wanted to point out. And then right here in the presentation, I've linked our entire report card. It's also available on our website. There's a lot of good information that the state provides there, along with a more detailed expenditure breakdown of how the state calculates these and what they leave out. So for instance, central admin, those codes are taken out. Transportation, debt service, those are not calculated in a lot of their formulas. Next, let's talk a little bit about contingent budget. That's a hot topic. I think you've been seeing a lot of discussion around the state on what this new voting format could do and the impact. I don't think it's any secret when we do absentee ballots at the end of a typical budget vote, that quite often it's a very close yay or nay on those that come in every night, and we're no different than many other districts. So there's a lot of questions around contingent budget this year because what do we do? How does this happen? What's the process? So typically if voters don't approve the budget, the board really had 2 choices. One is you do another vote in June, which would have been June 16th. If we were voting in May, the second would have been June 16th. So that's one thing you could do, but really right now I want to stress there is no executive order on this yet. The governor has not come out and said, you know what, let's pick another date in June, here's your revote date districts. So on the books, it was still June 16th. I love Cindy Cushman to death. I don't think we could have pulled off getting another series of absentee ballots out in time to prepare for a June 16th revote should the original vote go down. One of the things that was concerning through this process is we would be talking about a contingent budget when people are still asking questions about the original budget. There would be like a time overlaps. And honestly, I don't think some of the major printers in the area are already so backed up from school districts that they would have the capacity to repeat what we had just done in a short time. So that's the first thing. Or you could immediately, the board could decide, no, we're going contingent right after the first vote. We aren't going to do a second vote. So those are the options under a contingent. So now there's this contingent budget cap. So now it's based on the tax cap and taxes levied. The tax levy cannot be greater than the prior year. So if the vote goes down, we must remain at the levy that is currently in 1920. Okay? Can't raise a dollar higher. But certain items must be removed from the expenditure side. So equipment lines, free community use of school facilities. So any agreements that we have with Parks and Recreation or youth sports would have to immediately become null and void under state law. And we would, if anybody wants to use, would need to be charged an actual rate that is commensurate with us breaking even in essence. We couldn't have agreements with community organizations. We must stay in those administrative percentages. So we're at 77.5 for program, 7.3 for administrative. Whatever we cut would have to stay roughly the same, would stay the same ratio. So we couldn't keep our administrative at 7.3 and drop the program to 73. And then, work the numbers that way. It has to stay in the same ratio from year to year. And then the other thing, it's kind of broad as far as what is contingent, non-contingent. Must ensure the health, safety of students, staff, preserve the property of the district. Pretty generic. It's an action the board would have to take to determine what do we need to do to ensure that as we move forward if this became a reality. So right off the top, we'd have to take out about 1.9 million than the proposed, which you see on the budget notice. That's the fundamental basic would have to get removed in order to maintain that administrative cap, to keep program and administration in the same ratio of 77.5 to 7.3. We'd have to take out 1.8 right away. But then we'd also have to look at additional reductions or find new revenue. Because like I said, tax levy reverts back to this current year. So we lose, besides that 1.9, the other a little 2 million, because we'd have to go back to zero. So you see those two reduction numbers equal the total levy increase, which is the $3.9 million for this year. That's our cap. Okay. Questions on that contingent budget? I just want to take a stop and pause real quick because it could be a confusing concept if anybody had questions on that. All right. So moving forward then to take a look at those revenues that we have. So what do our revenues look like? 94% of our revenues come from three sources: property tax levy, state aid, and sales tax. Those are our three biggest areas. We don't really have a lot of revenue generating sources other than those three main areas. And these are strictly general fund. This is what gets voted on. This is what goes through general fund. This is not including any federal grants. So Title I, IDEA, UPK, those are all grants. Those are all kept separately, not part of this revenue stream for the district. Okay. And then, so this is what our revenues look like that we're proposing moving into next year. You can see here the addition of $140,000 more in reserves that we're planning on utilizing as a refresher from budget adoption, and then lowering the state aid as well. And then I'll just call out that property tax levy, the 3.9, that is what we would lose. And this is the number we go back to under a contingent budget. So you're really losing $3.9 million in revenue, and it is up to the board to decide how do you want to make that up under a contingent budget. Combination of some expenses have to come out. Maybe it's more reserves for a year. Maybe it's some fund balance, maybe you're appropriating more fund balance, or dropping some additional expenditures moving forward. So that's what it looks like on the revenue side. And then just a couple propositions that will be presented in the ballots that everybody got in their home or will get hopefully tomorrow. First one is the capital outlay project for next year. We're going to look to do the Schrader parking lot and the N-wing rooms, those music classrooms at Schrader, converting the fixtures to LED lighting for energy savings. Depending on how bids would be, we'll also look at some ceiling tile replacement. This is that transfer to capital we do every year for $100,000. This is the 5th year. We get the aid back the next year. These are for like routine maintenance type projects, but under a contingent, this cannot move forward. This would have to be removed from the budget. So we would not be able to do this going forward. And then the bus purchase proposition as a review. We are switching to a new model of bus based on feedback from drivers and staff that rides them, bus monitors, and some of our other staff that have to get onto buses occasionally for students with disabilities. We looked at something that was a little bit more user-friendly for both the students and the kids with a lower deck to step up to. So you see we've roughly the same identical amount of buses, 10 large buses, one with a wheelchair unit to be a sister unit with the wheelchair unit we bought last year. So when one goes down, we have a replacement for that one for its mandated service. And then 5 minibuses, one of the minibuses with a wheelchair unit as well. So really a small increase of $51,000 because of that minibus with the wheelchair unit. Last year, we did not buy a minibus with a wheelchair unit. And so that's your cost difference. And then also continue to maintain walking distance below state standards. Right now, it was voted on many years ago, and in policy, elementary is 1/4, secondary is 3/4, when the state is at 2 and 3 miles. And then the next proposition moving forward is to elect 3 individuals to 2 3-year terms beginning July 1 and 1 1-year term. Names will appear on the ballot as follows. Right here I've highlighted, so when we post the presentation and its finality, that will go right to the website that has everybody's biographical information. And then just to point out, the candidates with the 2 highest vote totals will be awarded the 2 3-year terms. Candidate with the 3rd highest vote total will be awarded the 1-year term respectively. And then next up is a quick little tutorial that I wanted to share on how to complete your absentee ballot for this year. Since it is different, I know we shared this out today, but the more we can get this out there, I think the better. We would like.
This is Webster Schools District Clerk Cynthia Cushman with some brief directions about how to properly complete your absentee ballot and envelope for the upcoming budget vote and Board of Education election. You'll receive your ballot in the U.S. mail soon. Ballots can be marked in pen or pencil, and you must make either an X or a check mark only in the voting ovals. One side of the ballot is where you will vote either yes or no on the proposed budget and the transportation proposition. On the other side of the ballot, you will vote for up to 3 candidates for the Board of Education. 7 candidates are listed. You may vote for a person whose name is not printed on this ballot by writing his or her name in the blank space provided at the bottom. There is no need to rewrite any of the candidates' names that already appear on the ballot. Once you've completed your ballot, please read and complete both sides of your absentee ballot envelope. Print your name, return address, county, and school district on one side. On the other side of the envelope is a statement of absentee voter. Read it and then sign your name. If your absentee ballot envelope is not signed, your ballot cannot be counted. Finally, fold your ballot, insert it into the absentee ballot envelope, and seal it. It is important that only one ballot be placed in one absentee ballot envelope. One return envelope addressed to the district clerk has been provided. There is ample postage for 2 absentee ballot envelopes to be placed inside that envelope. Please mail promptly, as ballots must be received by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, June 9th in order to be counted. If more than 2 ballots are needed per household, please contact me. Thank you for exercising your right to vote.
I think the most important piece that we're learning is that when people fill in the ovals, we've asked that they fill it in with a check or an X. And I know that all of us would love to fill in the bubble, but the way that our scanners work, the scanners really pick up the checks and the X's. So that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, and this will be embedded. I think if you played it on your own computer and maybe not through Zoom, it probably the volume would be much better. Yep. So we embedded that in there for everybody to have access to as another reminder as we move forward. And then last but not least, all the questions that were emailed to Cindy through this process, I have linked right here. So you'll see every question that came in is provided verbatim as they came in, and then the response that we collaborated on together is in blue. So they're all right here for everybody to see what came in, and the responses the district emailed back to everybody that took part in taking the time, which thank them for reaching out and asking some good questions on how this budget played out and what's going on district-wide. With that, any questions from anybody specifically about any parts of the presentation?
So I just have a couple comments, if I could. I know our budget is a relatively very small portion of the overall budget, but we are giving up some professional affiliations as a measure of savings, and we'll look to do so throughout the year wherever we can. Usually those conferences entail travel as well, so it can add up. The National School Board Association, we are giving that up for sure, and we're going to really be review every expenditure.
And you see that is in the administrative budget.
I did.
Right here under association dues, and then the Board of Education budget.
Yes,
those reductions. Yep.
Thank you. And then also, if you could speak to, we've been very careful about messaging that the capital projects that are taking place are not affiliated with the current budget. So if you could just speak to that a little bit and let people know that the capital projects have passed, the funding is in the form of state aid, which will come back to us, and that it is not a factor in this year's actual budget.
Yeah, it's a great point. It's a separate pot of money that the district accesses through building aid. The building aid comes in as general state aid, and then what we do is bond the project through our debt service. So if for reference, in workshop 1, we went over in a little bit into workshop 2, we saw the actual building aid, and I tied that. We had the debt service increase, which I could refresh everybody right here under capital, was total debt service was going up because of the 2 projects that were the 2016 project really is the reason, because as that's coming to a conclusion, we were borrowing, and we had a roughly almost an $850,000 building aid increase. But those projects, those pot of monies of what voters voted on, go for very specific work. And it goes through a very specific process that the state approves, and it's almost impossible, very difficult to change the scope of what voters approved to repurpose it for something else. moving forward. It has to be specifically what was presented to voters and what voters approved. You can't, for instance, in the 2016, when we approved a new auditorium at Spry, once voters approve that, you can't say, well, you know what, we're not going to do that. We're going to go do an auditorium at Plank North instead. That would be beyond the scope. The state would say, nope, you can't do that. So any changes like that can't happen. But for the most part, it's a set. The only time it comes into the budget is on that debt and building aid. Otherwise, those are separately approved referendums, and it's all accounted for separately in a different fund, not the general fund.
Brian, I had a question. I saw you had a listing for sales tax as part of our revenue that we get. And certainly, has that been impacted over the last 3 months with so many places not working and people not shopping, et cetera?
So we just actually last week got our first quarter update, and it was off a little bit from last year, but not the drastic amount. So it was within the margin of error of our budget. So, it wasn't, the first quarter of the county fiscal year for sales tax is really our third quarter of our fiscal year, because we're going July 1 through July, August, September. That's our first quarter, is really the third quarter of the county fiscal year. So match up. It wasn't off by that much. So I think we'll have to wait till mid-August to see really the meat and potatoes of where we were for that final quarter for us, which is the second quarter for sales tax going forward.
Okay.
But we're planning on, as far as our fiscal wrapping up the end of the year, of not hitting the target where I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
Tammy, I'd like to offer a comment.
Please do.
As the newest board member, background in business, managing organizations, both the scope and size of this well over $100 million budget, properties the same size as the school district, and similar number of employees. I wanted to do a deep dive before I gave my yes vote for this budget to make sure that it was absolutely, given the extraordinary circumstances of the COVID virus and the time we're in, that it was the best budget we could offer to the taxpayers. And absolutely, I think Brian did a phenomenal job, going through everything, staying under the tax cap while maintaining student programs, but more importantly, doing budgets during 9/11 in the fiscal crisis. You had to do contingency planning. And Brian has really done a nice job with that. He's talked about how he already thought about, if there's a contingency budget, what he'd have to do to still maintain programs, but yet bring us in line with that in the worst case scenario. And so he checked all the boxes and concerns I had, and that's why I offered my vote for the budget. And I would urge all the taxpayers to strongly consider this as the best budget, considering the circumstances we're under today. So nice job, Brian.
Thank you.
A lot of hard work. Anyone else have anything you'd like to add?
Yes, I'd just like to ask a question, please. Can you hear me?
Yep. Okay.
So when we go back to the instructional and the capital and the administrative budgets, how does our district compare to other districts as far as the proportion of our budget in those categories? Are there general guidelines that districts aim for?
You're right. We're right there with generally everybody else. Less than 10% on the administrative, I think, is a good benchmark for what everybody goes for. And then, you want the program to be, the bulk of what you're doing.
Right.
Capital fluctuates a little bit based on how people do their borrowings. So some have very large debt services. So you might see the capital take up a larger share, where, the largest share of our capital is debt service, followed closely, evenly matched with our actual operations and maintenance budget.
Mhm.
So some will have, usually if you have a large debt service, you have a smaller operations and maintenance, but since we're a larger district with 13 facilities to take care of, we're a little bit of both, kind of trying to evenly matched.
Okay.
So yeah, if you look at these presentations from snapshots across the county, generally I think we're all relatively the same.
Okay, great, thank you.
Anyone else have anything to add before we move on?
Good job.
Okay, thank you, Brian. This has certainly been an extraordinary year and an awful lot of work on your part, and we do all appreciate very much
Yes.
working under very difficult circumstances and in a very dynamic atmosphere. So thank you once again on behalf of all of us.
Thank you.
So moving on to regular business, we had decided to add a superintendent's report. So we know that there are a lot of big questions that are still unanswered in our community. And Carmen, just give everybody an update about how you're working through these challenges and how people are going to be represented so they know they're part of it.
Sure. Thanks, Tam. So I think as I attempt every week to update the each of the staffs and each of the faculties across the district. And over the last week or so, I usually start with, I do some medical updates from Dr. Mendoza because the superintendents meet with Dr. Mendoza each Wednesday. And the great thing about the superintendent group is that, we do meet at least twice a week. We Zoom together because we really do want to have a coordinated regional type of plan. Not only have we been doing that since March, but certainly in everyone's mind, it's, what will September look like? And, one of the things that I talked about today was, at this point, we don't know what September will look like. I do expect us to be back in school in some form or fashion. And, I know that people have said, oh, this is what they're planning on doing. They're going to do this, they're going to do that. And anyone who says that they know the plan doesn't know the plan, because there's no set plan yet, because we don't know the rules. And the guidance and the rules per se will come out from the governor and within probably the next 2 weeks, early to mid-June. And then we'll take that guidance and we will basically use that guidance to craft a plan, a reopening plan that we will send into the state for approval. Now, the reopening plan, I'm going to imagine, will have the same types of components that we had in March when we closed down. And those components are how you're going to feed your families, what about daycare, and what is something about virtual learning. And I'm sure there'll be other pieces on there as well. The virtual learning is on there just, again, I think it's a matter of, all right, let's say we do start in September. There may very well be students and families that choose not to send their children for medical conditions or for whatever reasons. So we will most likely, I'm 99.9% sure, that the virtual learning will still have to be part of our opening. It doesn't mean that we'll be totally virtual. It just means that we have to plan for those students who may not be able to return to school. And so the plan itself, as we go to look to formulate the plan, to shape it, and to craft it, we've been really lucky, first of all, to have a really overwhelming response to our all call for volunteers to serve on our advisory groups. And so we have over 200, close to 250, 225, I'm looking for Aaron Land, about 225, 250 staff members who have volunteered to be on one of our 6 advisory groups. The advisory groups will include, there'd be one advisory group that is formed by elementary teachers, another advisory group for middle school teachers, another one for high school teachers, an advisory group for related services like OT, PT, speech, literacy, mental health, and then an advisory group that will be, again, this is a staff and faculty advisory group that's made from safety and security, nursing, secretaries, and then we'll have another one for aides and TAs. So basically, every part of our faculty and staff, every group, will have an opportunity to be part of our advisory teams that will help us with some of the data that we've collected, and also just giving us some suggestions, some concerns, and some, hey, have you thought about this yet? Have you thought about that? Really talking about some of the challenges that we may have, that we may miss, and to have voices, 250 voices, to say, hey, have you thought about this for September, and so on. I think that really helps us. So that's the staff and faculty opportunity for input. And then we have also, we've reached out to high school student class advisors to help us, first of all, put a survey together that has all students be able to sort of share us their thoughts about September, and also give us some suggestions and some of their concerns. That survey, we're crafting it now. Hopefully it'll be out in 2 to 3 weeks. And then we're going to be able to also use a student advisory group from both high schools to, again, get their feedback around, here's what we think September could look like, what are your thoughts, and so on. And then finally, I've been within probably the last few hours in contact with our central PTSA chairwoman, and to help identify parents who would like to be part of a parent advisory team that can help us, again, have their voices heard within our plan. So it is, we're hoping for some really specific, detailed guidance from the state. That's what we're hoping for. Who knows if we'll get really detailed, specific language from the state, but that's okay, because again, we'll have all kinds of voices from our staff and faculty, as well as our students and parents, and hopefully we'll be able, as a group of 19 superintendents, be able to work together as well on that regional plan to reopen. Will every single district open the exact same way? Probably not. There are districts that have 1/5 of the students that we have, and there are districts that have 4,000 more students than we have. So depending on the district, it may look a little bit different, but I do think the general concepts of reopening and the general look of the day will probably be very similar across all of Monroe County. And again, we will be following governor's guidance from the state health department, and also the guidance from Dr. Mendoza, and also County Executive Bello. And just a shout out to Dr. Mendoza, who has been just an amazing voice of expertise, a voice of calm reason. And he's just been marvelous to work with. He's just been so generous with his time as well, whether or not it's every Wednesday that we meet with him, or just via email, via text. He's been really a marvelous doctor to work with. So, and that's all I have, Tam. I'm not sure if any of the board members have any questions, or if any of my colleagues want to add anything, but that's what I have regarding reopening.
Thank you. I think, we just wanted to be reassured that, the breadth of inclusion in the decisions that will be made, and everything that we do certainly has the safety and security of our students and staff foremost. So anyone else, please jump in if you'd like to add.
So, and I did forget a group, and I can't believe I forgot. Food service will also be part of the group. Will be part of the advisory teams. They'll be asked to join. Sorry about that, Kelly and Stacy, but no, it's Kathy. Sorry, Kath, I can't. Anyway, so it's not that that food service isn't important, because you're about to see just how important they are as they give us their report. But I'll take any questions if anybody has any, and if not, we can just transition to the next agenda item.
Armin, it's Mike. Have you gotten any guidance on sports? Because some of the activities start in early August.
Yeah, so we typically would start practices in mid-August, by August 10th, 11th, or 12th, something like that. We have not heard anything regarding sports. I think it would come with guidance. I think it's something that the New York State Public High School Athletic Association is working on. I know our 2 athletic directors are probably in daily contact with Section 5 officials. Our hope would be to make a call on fall sports by August 1st. And I don't know if all fall sports will be approved, and or none, or no fall sports. We're really not sure. So we're still waiting on guidance for that.
Okay, thank you. And then what about if there's a second wave?
If there's a second wave, that would be part of the reopening plan. I'm sure that's going to be a factor. And so it's almost like, okay, if there is a second wave and we have to go to a 100% virtual learning, here's the plan for how it would happen. Luckily, we've been through it once, in mid-March. So I think that would be an easier transition. And hopefully, I think most of the scientists out there, most of the science would tell us that there will be a second wave. We just don't know the height of the peak of infection and the severity of that second wave. So I think it's just, we sort of have to wait, but plan for that total shutdown, and hope that, that the second wave isn't as steep. There's not a steep slope for that second wave.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Are we okay? We know we've been hearing from you about this all along, but just thought it was important for our community to hear the same message as well. So thank you for that report.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to board business, we have a food service update. Welcome. You've played such a critical role in serving our students and families throughout the community, and we are so very grateful for your effort and those of all of the people who are helping you. We've seen pictures and certainly know that it's been a Herculean effort. And before you even start, we're thanking you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you guys get us again. I'm only going to talk for a little bit of the middle part of this presentation, but I want to introduce, many of you have met Mark Belfour, our Director of Food Service, many times, but with him is Kathy Palmer and Stacy Snyder, 2 of the backbones of the operation. Don't let Kathy fool you like she did to me and Paul earlier. She is logging in on her daughter's computer, and so we had to question who this Kelly was that was trying to get access to all of our information, thanks to our cybersecurity checks that we have in place. So I'm going to let Mark start us off and take over from here. But just what they've been able to accomplish with a shorthanded staff, and we're able to get up and off the ground running at the start of this shutdown and be able to provide meals for families has been nothing short of extraordinary. So I just wanted to start off with that and thank them and the staff that we've kept over at Schrader before we start.
So thank you for inviting us to speak tonight, and thank you for the kind words. I'd like to give a shout out especially to Buildings and Grounds and security. They have been great with helping us hand out food and manage the crowds and just the whole process. So they've been great. So I think they should be mentioned too, even though we typically get the credit on Facebook when the kind words are spoken. But thank you for having us tonight. Slide 2 is our agenda. Brian, are you controlling that?
I am controlling it as best I can.
We know I can't do it. So for our agenda tonight, we're going to discuss a program overview. We're going to give some historical program changes. We're going to discuss participation data, the impact of COVID-19, our current financial position, and also some program adjustments that we're looking forward to next year. Next slide, Brian. Oh, we're there, sorry. So this slide here just indicates some information about our food service program, who we have working, how many people we have working. One of the things I'd like to point out is that we do use a computerized cash register system, and the vast majority of anything that we can do is electronic, right down to our free and reduced applications. The vast majority of our applications that we receive do come to us electronically. But the reason I point this out is that I want you to understand and know that parents have the ability to restrict their students' purchases via whether that's by dollar or by item, and it's a great tool for parents to use to monitor their students' purchases and also place the restrictions should they choose to. Slide 4, some program changes. Due to the 2010, we call it Holy Hifka, but it stands for Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act. That was passed in 2010. It didn't take effect for a couple of years, but it was extremely prescriptive on what we could offer to our students. As you can see from the slide, minimums and maximums are prescribed for us with calories, fat, sodium. And what that does to us is it gives us a great source of difficulty finding products that are acceptable to our students. The sales and participation data that you will see later in the presentation will show you, I think, that students are making the choice to participate or not rather than their parents. Even when the USDA does relax regulations, which they did for the administrative review, it used to be every 5 years, then they changed it to every 3 years. They relaxed it and went back to 5 years, but New York State decided to keep every 3 years in place. Whole grain and sodium regulations have eased. However, a court recently decided that decision to relax those regulations was illegal. So we're constantly in a state of flux as to whether we're following the regulations or not following the regulations, and whether we can source products that are acceptable. Minimum wage hikes, it not only affects salary, but it also affects all of the benefit categories that are percentage based, such as Social Security, workers' comp, retirement contribution. With the loss of revenue due to those forced regulations, we can't raise prices fast enough to keep up. And unfortunately, if we do raise prices to keep up, then we risk losing participation, which we see every time we raise meal prices, which is also prescribed by USDA. So we don't have, even if we're making money and we're doing great, they still will require us to raise our prices. Internally, some things that we have changed. 2010-11, we served only lunch. 2019 and 20, we now have concessions operations at 5 sites. Catering, which has exploded, would have hit over $100,000 this year, but obviously with the shutdown in March, that derailed our target. Sorry, Kathy. We've become basically the district Instacart, so science classes, home ec classes, anybody that needs food, instead of all of the extra POs needing to be created or all of the people needing to go shopping, they can come to us and we fill those orders for them. We've implemented breakfast in every school, Wonder Care obviously with the schedule change, and the greenhouse. At the greenhouse, we're averaging 25 visits by Webster classrooms annually. Many of them are the 5th grade science classes, and that's in addition to the 25 visits I make to classrooms prior to them visiting the greenhouse. The chemistry class from Thomas annually will visit the greenhouse 1 to 2 times a week for 6 weeks roughly to learn hands-on experience in addition to what they're learning in the classroom. We also teach community ed classes, even provide flip opportunities on superintendent conference days. And then last with the greenhouses, during the COVID shutdown, rather than shut down the greenhouse, we have decided to give the lettuce and vegetables to the parents. We also utilize them in salads that we're preparing for the students for pickup meals. We're also donating any perishable foods that we won't be able to utilize and lettuce to the Hope Ministries. They're quite delighted when they get salad and salad dressing. But the Hope Ministries and the House of Mercy in the city of Rochester is who we have been donating that food to. And it's great for us because it keeps the greenhouse operating at peak efficiency. Slide 6. One of the regulations that we were impacted with this year was the lunch shaming. And what that regulation states is that we cannot deny a student a meal in the serving line. So as you can see, the high schools have the highest total. And that's kind of, it makes sense because the kids are smart enough to figure out that we can't deny them a meal. So that's why the totals are going to be higher. It's challenging for us because there's really nothing we can do about it, and they can just kind of keep increasing their negative debt. Now, these totals that you see, these include the donations that we've gotten from American Legion this year of $3,500, and this slide was probably created before our last donation by a parent of another $500. So we're at about $4,500 in donations this year to help with the debt. But it does increase labor, sending notes home, constantly tracking it, sending letters to parents, letting them know that they're racking up a big negative debt, and it's causing a problem for us. You can see that it's $1,500 on average. Sorry, Brian. It's $1,500 on average is where we're at about this time of the year. Now we're at $12,000. So it just keeps getting worse. And the problem is it gets contagious because people start to figure out that, well, we don't really have to pay. And my concern is that it will also have a negative impact on free and reduced application submission, because if I don't have to pay and I don't have to submit an application, what's the motivation to submit an application? The impact of Smart Snack regulations. So these regulations, again, require us to meet certain fat targets, sugar targets, sodium targets. It just extremely limits what we can sell down to, and you'll see it in the next slide, down to basically a fruit, a vegetable, or a protein. So you can see the impact, you can see the numbers here, but the high schools are down 8,463 a month. However, we implemented some items this year that USDA wouldn't necessarily think that we should be selling, but we wanted to see what the impact would be if we tinkered with it and piloted a few items. And the difference is, if we didn't put those items in, instead of being down 8,463 a month, we would be down $17,469 a month. So you can see that over 10 years, we're talking about $170,000+. You will later on see some data charts, and maybe you've already seen them, but I would point out to you that at the middle schools where we didn't tinker as much, you'll see an increase for this year. And so you would think that, well, everything's fine, but that's only because we brought things back like intense milk. And that's a great example because that's an item that we can't sell. It's milk, but because the size is too big, it doesn't meet the calorie requirements and it doesn't meet the fat requirements, despite the fact that it's milk, but the kids love it and they happily buy it, which I would want them to buy something like that. So a tale of two sets of snack rules. This pretty much says it all. Here's the differences. Prior to 2010, it was, we couldn't sell soda, we couldn't sell candy, and we couldn't have food-related fundraisers. I won't go through all the other requirements that have come up since 2010, but it kind of shows you that it's really difficult to find items that we can sell and meets all those requirements. And at the bottom, where it says entrees, cheeseburgers cannot be sold on a daily basis unless offered as a meal. What they're saying is that they're telling us that cheeseburgers are okay to sell as long as it's part of a meal. And we can sell it on a snack basis. So if a child just wants to buy a cheeseburger and nothing else, we can do that as long as we are also offering that cheeseburger as part of a meal. But let's say that cheeseburgers are a favorite. We couldn't sell that on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday if we had sold it Monday, unless it was offered as part of a meal. Well, that really impacts what we can and and can't sell. And it just makes it difficult for menu planning. Slide 8.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
How do you figure out all the meals that are compliant with the post-2010 rules? Do you have a dietitian on staff, or who goes through everything and figures this out for the students?
So back in 2010, when they first came out with these regulations, they also put out an Excel spreadsheet, and we had to go in and enter all of our data in there. We entered our nutrition information, and we have all that information, and so we entered all that, and it tells us whether or not we're compliant or not. So you have to manage that until you're compliant, and we were compliant, and we were approved for that piece. And then going forward, it's a matter of entering the data into a nutritional analysis software that we utilize. Stacy, who will be presenting in a little while, she handles the vast majority of the data entry. And so what we have to do is we enter that data, and then we have to make decisions on whether we're compliant or not compliant. And the crazy part is that, I could offer something that is completely nutritious and healthy. Let's say I wanted to offer a lettuce wrap, for example. Great, sounds delicious. But because there's a minimum number of calories, if I can't get to the minimum number of calories with that lettuce wrap, I can't offer it. So what we find ourselves doing is managing to the calories. And in a lot of cases, it's managing to the minimums, because what the goal is that you meet those calories with fruits and vegetables. And that's great. That's a noble goal. I myself am trying to eat way more fruits and vegetables than anything else to maintain my weight, but I'm not active as active as a 16-year-old would be, or a 10-year-old would be. Trying to get to those calories with fruits and vegetables is very difficult. And then it's not just a matter of getting to those numbers, it's a matter of, are the children consuming the products, the food? Because as you're going to see in the data later, they're not. Because if we see a 30% drop in participation, despite the fact that we're offering it, parents aren't making the decisions for their children to go and eat those foods. The children are making the decisions to not go and eat those foods. And so that's where the difficulty comes for us. But I took the long way around to your answer. I apologize. But that's the answer.
Thank you.
So on this slide, it represents items that are no longer offered. The mini calzones I draw attention to because the company that used to make those, they're a really great product. Kids loved them. But because the company didn't feel like they could make a product that they were happy with, they decided to just not sell that item any longer. And that becomes very difficult for us to find products the students would like when you have to get to those calories and it has to be strictly fruits, vegetables, protein. You can't have any additional fat in there, but the fat is what's going to drive the calories up. And so we end up with challenges trying to find things that the kids would eat. And the interesting thing to me is that if the students were eating this way at home, then they would want to eat this way at school. And I've had conversations with parents over the years, 30 years of experience, and they don't understand why we're not selling things like casseroles and different items that they want their kids to eat. And my response to them, my question back to them is, what do your children eat at home? When you go to Mark's or Salvatore's Pizzeria, do you order whole grain pizza? Do you order a low sodium pizza? You probably don't, because you wouldn't eat it, and your kids aren't going to eat it. It's not flavorful. It's not what they want. So because you're not feeding your children this way, you can't expect them to come to school and want to eat in a way that they're not used to eating when they're at home. And parents understand that. They get that example. So I think we're going into the data dive next.
Yep. So
Right.
now I'm back up with you. So we're going to ask you later in this presentation to take a leap of faith and a recommendation from us based on some of this data. So I wouldn't be able to give you a recommendation without at least showing you what Mark and I started investigating almost a year ago. And it really was astounding last fall when we started tearing into some of this data. Like, wow, I knew it was bad, but I didn't realize it was this bad. I want to focus in on the high school, but I also have middle school and elementary school data for you to look at as well. But I just want to take you through our high school. So this is a tale. I'm going to focus on 2011-12 and 2019-20 month of October. We selected October because it's a great benchmark month. There isn't a huge holiday. The number of operating days are consistent. There aren't snow days in October. We're 1 month fully into the school year. There's no anomalies. It's probably one of our most consistent months that food service could possibly have. So I want to compare 11-12, 19-20. So start off, show you operating days, and then show you enrollment, because you'll see there is a decrease in enrollment. But I'm going to tease out the data to show you the reason why we're losing participation is not because of enrollment. So next line up here is total free and reduced meals. In 2011-12, we served 5,821 free and reduced meals in the month of October. With one extra day this past October, we served 5,758, okay? What is that as a percentage of the total meals served? So it was 19.7 in 11-12. It is now 31.5 in 19-20. Okay, huge jump in overall piece of the pie. So, but the amount of meals has stayed consistent. Total paid meals, this is just students buying a lunch, coming in, was in 11-12, 23,725. Okay. This past October, it was 12,540. It's a 47% drop for that month in the 9 years. So in 11-12, 80% of the meals we were sending out the door were paid meals. Now it's about 68%. And then the next line is the total meals was about 29,546, where you're down to total meals between free and reduced and paid to 18,298. So our participation went from 50% to 33%. All right, so I wanted to take a look at, to me, when we first started tearing into this was, was like jaw-droppingly how much we have lost participation with these new regulations. So wanted to break that down further. Well, maybe it's enrollment. Maybe it's not. Let's see what's happening. Why is average daily participation important? Okay, because that is just total meals that we serve divided by the days available. Okay, it really takes out enrollment. So regardless of enrollment, it should stay, if kids were still participating, it should stay relatively stable. But it didn't. It's gone from 1,477 down to 871. It's a 41% drop. So then I want to take, all right, the average kid just walking in, how many meals a month are they buying? Let's take a look at it. From a hair over 10 to just below 7 now. So enrollment is, to us, is really not the factor. It is what we're serving. Kids are walking away from this program at a much faster rate than we had anticipated with the rules and regulations, and then what we're doing to try to offset that. They're just not into it, is what it comes down to. So then snack sales. In 11-12, we did $40,460 in snack sales before really the implementation of the rules and regulations. So on a year at the high schools, that would pull in $364,140 in 11-12. So let's fast forward, look at 18-19, what I've highlighted in blue. Our snack sales in 18-19 plummeted to $22,991. It's a huge drop from 11-12. So Mark and I had kind of been talking about this that we might be heading down this direction. So, you know, I gave Mark a little bit of leeway. I said, I'll take the hit if we get audited. Let's test drive. What if we change it? Let's start with snacks because it was such a precipitous drop. And get a little bit more into the gray area of what's acceptable and what's not. Just in that 1 month of the kids of so really all they had was September to realize that some items have come back. And look what October did in it went from already 22,991, it jumped to 31,000, just shy of 32,000. So we've just with very limited items, we were able to claw back almost half the loss in snack sales. So that's why it's important, Mark alluded to it earlier, just making those small changes, what the difference was in snack sales. So kids flocked to it. I don't think there's any which way to doubt that data, which made us think a little bit harder about, all right, what is that telling us in that small sample size of kids' tastes and palates? And maybe we need to look at that going forward. So we focused on high school. We spent a lot of time digging into the high school data. The middle school data and the elementary school data, I'm just going to gloss over, but I want to take a second. There's a lot here on this slide of information, but it's really the catalyst for what we're going to ask you guys in about 7 or 8 slides going forward. So I want to make sure everybody has had a chance to kind of ask a couple questions if you have any. All right, so I'll quickly, same process. This is the middle school, same month. We saw, I'll point out the snack sales again. The losses weren't as precipitous as the secondary, still a loss, but the snack sales also huge hit. Minimal changes at middle school. So, you know, maybe if we could say high school was, you know, Papa Bear changes. This would be Baby Bear changes, and then elementary was no changes. So you saw, we saw an increase in that 1 month at middle school. And then at elementary school, we didn't make any changes. Left it the same, left it keep going, and you saw a continuous drop in snack sales also as well. So what is this data telling us that we're looking at? We have a huge secondary problem. There are 28,000 less meals per month. So when you add up all the lost meals between 11-12, 19-20, we're averaging 28,000 less meals per month, K-12. Students are simply walking away. And then snack sales are down almost $221,000 a year over the past 10 years. So all these expense increases we've had, and we're in essence out of the snack programming hemorrhaging money. Enrollment's dipped, but that's not the issue here. And I think the data really tease that out. So I want to talk a little bit about then the COVID impact when we're getting into financials and what that's done to the food service program this year. So what I'm estimating is the total projected financial loss for 1920 is about $321,000 for the food service program because we're shut down for 3 months. And you'll see some of the data in a little bit, but under the current executive order, you know, we're still paying our food service staff with nowhere near the offsetting revenue coming in. So we're projecting a loss, a substantial loss for this year, despite Mark, Kathy, and Stacy and the staff's best efforts. So where are we losing? So the reimbursable meals were down about 167,000. Our a la carte sales at the time when we were shut down were actually up. So Mark had made some great changes with the adult menus, doing some different offerings. So to me, it's a loss because we are trending up. This was going to be a bonus for the food service moving forward systemically, but we are shut off. And so to me, it's a loss on the revenue side. Lunch, federal lunch reimbursements, obviously going to be down. Breakfast, is obviously down. Catering and concessions, as of before even getting into spring sports, we're up over $66,000 over last year. Mark, Kathy, and Stacy put together some great menu items that we're selling like hotcakes. We were trending in the right direction, but it was all cut off. And then just to put in perspective, you know, when we did this, we were looking at, we're probably up to 800, but averaging 750 a day. Normally we did 3,100 meals a day on a normal. Still great numbers of people coming through, but it's nowhere near enough to offset the normal everyday losses this program was taking. So there's a lot of systemic program issues that are tough to overcome, pretty much the regulations. So what's that doing to the financial position? I'm sorry, was there a question? I thought I heard somebody chiming in. Didn't want to cut you off. So the financial position. So this is a look back all the way to 2009-10, a year before really a lot of these regulations started coming in, and you see a lot of red that is happening. Based on this loss, where we're projected, and this is unaudited, that food service would be down to $13,000 in the bank, in essence, from the losses throughout this program. You see a couple of years we had some positives, but they're positives, you know, not great positives, but, you know, breaking even. You know, a $13,000 in 15-16 is, you know, is on a $3 million budget is pretty much breaking even, in my opinion. And then some substantial losses as we've had some tough hits, costs that escalated, and kids walking away from the program. So all this kind of compounds to what Kathy and Stacy are going to kind of run through for you real quick, is a need for some program adjustments moving forward. And with that, I'm going to let Stacy and Kathy take over, and I'm just going to guide the PowerPoint.
Okay. I just want to preface this video before we play it that we realize pictures and videos are hard to convey the quality and taste of food without the stainless steel in the video and not being able to view and taste in person.
And we apologize that we did not deliver directly to all your homes tonight.
This video depicts an actual menu day that we served on 115 with all options available to the students. Following the guidelines for the National School Lunch Program, the students must take a fruit or vegetable with their meal, which requires a lot of space on the serving lines to make sure we offer enough choices. For us to meet the mandatory vegetable requirements for the week, some days we have to offer up to 3 vegetable offerings. To meet the minimum calorie regulation, we offer different pasta salads every day, which takes up time, space, and labor to create. Only an average of 20% of the meals served take the pasta salad, which we believe would increase if we would offer it with the pasta the students prefer and menued with entrees it pairs well with. We have seen a 30,276 annual meal decrease in pizza sales from the 11-12 school year to the 18-19 school year at the high school level due to regulations having us offer whole grain crust and low sodium cheese, which affects the taste and appearance of the item. We have also seen a 14,496 annual meal decrease in the main entree sale from the 11-12 school year to the 18-19 school year due to regulations requiring whole grain breading on popular items and certain manufacturers discontinuing other popular items mentioned earlier, such as the mini calzones and Tony's cheese sticks. On the next slide, you will see the potential of what we could offer out of the program. With being out of the program, this allows us to streamline the serving lines with choices the students actually want. The students won't be forced to take any item they don't want and allows the students to customize their meals to their taste. The serving line is now more colorful and food's taste has improved and is more compatible with what they're used to at home and in restaurants. Without the regulations, we are now allowed to offer different types of rolls and crackers to complement the meals we're offering. With the regulations, we had to offer a whole grain roll, even a whole grain saltine cracker. With limited manufacturing of these items that meet the grain requirement, this left us with few options to offer. We now can offer items such as a ciabatta roll or soft dinner roll instead, or oyster crackers and regular sardines to go with homemade soup. With being out of the program, we can offer a soup, salad, and dinner roll combination as a meal, making our own soups while using regular soup base that adds more flavor, and prepackaged salads using the greenhouse lettuce, which is popular with students and staff. The following slide, you'll see a visual of the difference of offerings in the program and out. The cookies depicted on the top of the screen show the difference between the whole grain chocolate chip cookies and the regular chocolate chip cookies. The whole grain are smaller and darker than the regular cookies with a vast taste difference. As mentioned earlier, with us piling the selling of regular cookies this school year, the cookie sales soared from previous years due to this change. The pizza shown in the picture below shows the difference in color and shape of the product. The whole grain pizzas use low sodium cheese, which alters the flavor profile of pizza, and the cheese doesn't melt as well as non-low sodium cheese. With making pizzas from scratch and having to offer a whole grain crust, we only have a square pizza crust available to us that met the regulations, which is an unpopular pizza shape. Out of the program, we have round pizza shells available to us and able to use more flavorful cheese to top the pizza with and have more creative rates to the types of pizza we can make. The entrees on the right-hand side show the color contrast of foods offered now versus what we could. The whole grain breaded chicken drumstick with the whole grain dinner roll isn't as eye-appealing as the brightly colored greenhouse tossed salad with fresh ciabatta roll that can be paired with scratch-made chicken escarole soup. Out of the program will allow us to have more flexibilities with recipes we develop to account for flavor profiles, not just to meet the regulations. Now on to Kathy for more meal comparisons.
Hello, everyone. I will be sharing the next 3 slides with you, starting with number 24. This is the sandwich bar currently under the National School Lunch Regulations. I will preface it with sharing that everything we currently offer to our students ensures compliance with the USDA guidelines. Being out of the program allows students to have more choices. This video depicts sandwiches currently pre-made, wrapped with limited bread, cheese, and cold cut selections. All are either low sodium or low fat, lacking in appearance and taste. Choices are being made ahead of time for our students in accordance, to keep us in compliance with the USDA guidelines. For number 25, next slide. This slide here is about the sandwich bar. Being out of the program, it is all about choice. Being out of the program allows us to streamline the serving area and essentially mirroring deli wrap stations that our students are accustomed to. Students are able to choose exactly what they would like on their sandwich or sub in regards to increased variety of cold cuts, cheese, and bread selections. We are also able to introduce additional new fresh soup and salad toppings while utilizing assorted greens, celery, cucumbers, and tomatoes from our greenhouse. It is visually more appealing and not to mention more flavorful. Before our break here, we started to introduce some fresh homemade soups with our staff, such as chicken escarole, our seafood chowder with our own tilapia, and our faux broth bowls. All were very well received. We are also able to be more creative in introducing new items. Mark keeps asking for a cheeseburger soup, so we'll see how we go with that one. But it's something that it gives us a lot more flexibility in working with our staff and with the students. In the last slide here in 26. Yep. This is the difference between some of our, we're challenged with taste and choices continually. This is the difference here with just our 2 crackers. Currently with the new guidelines, we are only able to offer the whole grain crackers, which the students don't really care for. The oyster crackers are preferred. In comparing the 2 types of sandwiches, again, these sandwiches that we currently are able to offer within the guidelines are pre-made and wrapped, limiting choices versus a fresh made-to-order sub or sandwich. Again, giving them the choice of all of their cheese, meat, or bread selections. And in regards to the soup items here, the tomato soup actually shown is actually in our menu. That is a vegetable component that we are able to offer the students, where if we're out of the program, we can be more creative with homemade soups. Chicken escarole was a very popular one towards the end of the school year there. And then our pho, which is featured up in the far right corner there. It's basically either a beef, chicken, or a vegetable broth. And we can have anywhere from 8 to 12 different fresh toppings that students can add to that. It also is a gluten-free item for our students who require that. I think what I'd like to conclude with 3 takeaways for our selections here. The first one is it's either limited choices versus the students having a choice. The second one would be our pre-made items versus fresh made to order. And the third one would be a lack of interest versus increased participation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stacy and Kathy. I guess we could get right into what we're going to recommend from the board. And right off the bat, I think Mark and I quickly came to it's time for Schrader and Thomas to leave the National School Lunch and Breakfast Program. I don't think we could wait any longer based on where our data is heading. For a huge reason is because next year at this time, as we go through the budget process, I'd be asking the Board of Education to begin to subsidize the school lunch program. In essence, we'd be asking taxpayers to transfer funds on a regular basis to subsidize the school lunch program from the general fund, which many districts do. I mean, some, they do that. But I think anything we could do before we get to that part, we need to look at, because it's a separate program. It should be and needs to be self-sustaining. Otherwise, it's just a terrible business model. So we need to react to what's happening. And so Schrader and Thomas, we want to pull out from the program. Wait a year and then make a decision on Spry and Willink. Mark could talk a little bit more about this, incorporating free and reduced into the high school program as if nothing has changed for those students. That's also a recommendation. So they won't see any kind of change. It'll just be a different Webster Central School District application versus a governmental application. No matter what next year, and we do this in June, we always give you guys a heads up, we will need to increase prices for middle and elementary as the goalposts are shifting under the program, under the USDA pricing requirements. We'll finalize that probably in the July reorg meeting this year. Another recommendation is in June, we will probably need to make the school lunch fund whole for any losses sustained during the COVID closure. So we will need to transfer general fund money just this one time to make them whole. That's something we're working out with our auditors. Some SED guidance on that from the school lunch program. And then finally, a recommendation that we're going to propose is to start exploring a culinary program similar to EMCC with the new program coming to Thomas. More to come on that, because leaving the program at the high school will open up even more opportunities for student work interactions. So we think that pairs nicely together. Mark, anything else you want to add to that recommendation to the board?
No. Just I would point out on number 2 that, as Brian said, we will make sure that free and reduced students are still eating for free if they and/or reduced if they qualify. And then I would just offer up if you have any questions.
Yeah. So just next step, board at approval, we need to notify the state, notify the community, really let Kathy and Stacy dig their teeth into menu design and pricing. If you want to explore a benchmark district, Pittsford is not in the program. So you can kind of get an idea of perhaps another district that has done this. and work with students around menu items. Kathy and Stacy alluded to this. There literally is no opportunity for student input on what we serve, because Mark explained he puts his menu into an Excel spreadsheet and it spits out what he needs to make. So the kids can't have any say in what's offered. This gives us the opportunity at high school, run focus groups, do some Google forms, get their opinion. You know what? We love the taco bar. Maybe this soup wasn't so great. It's, it would really be a much better user, customer service perspective, and really adapting to the customer and our audience. And then finally, finalizing some price points based on menu development is really our next step. So with that, questions?
Brian, can I add to point 5?
Go right ahead, Mark.
So in talking about surveying, Brian's exactly right. We're going to tinker as much as we can to try and find the right products and menu items for students, but I want to be able to survey students, find out what they would like to eat, and work with it. So as you saw in one of the videos, Kathy had the salad bar laid out. One of the reasons we took the salad bar away is because we can't offer items that the kids want. One of the items that was shown there was banana peppers. Well, banana peppers have salt. So as soon as we put that on as an item, it raises the salt up, and now we can't utilize that item. And the other point that I don't think we made I'll take the blame for that, I didn't make a good argument for, is that currently we're required to give students things they don't want. We would far rather price their meals in such a way where they're purchasing the items that they would like to eat. We're still going to offer healthy, nutritious items every single day, delicious items. Our salad bar, our salads that we produce with lettuce in the greenhouse, our yogurt parfaits. We have many, many items that are just delicious, nutritious, and healthy. But we want to be able to give kids a choice, because they're making the choice to walk away from the program. And we want to be able to bring those kids back in and make the food service a place where they'd like to eat.
Right, and to piggyback on that, I'll just go back to the slide that Kathy showed, the discrepancy. This wrapped sandwich right in the middle, and this made to order that looks like any sub we'd go get at a Wegmans or a DeBella's, any place else. America's obesity problem, which this law was made to address, is not going to come from kids making the decision between this or that.
Good point.
So, questions for any of us, please? This is a big kind of movement. So,
I was just going to. Sorry, go ahead.
Jan, go ahead.
I was just going to say that for years I've just heard high school kids sort of casually talk about not wanting to buy a whole meal, and they're more of an a la carte kind. They just want to pick up a blank, and it sort of looks like the data supports that we do better with a la carte than we do serving whole meals. So that's one thought I had. The other question I have, all these kids that suddenly, because of the new regulations, stopped participating in the program, were they bringing meals from home? I know we don't keep track, or were people just not eating, or were they bringing a breakfast bar? Do we know what the trends were? Did it have anything to do with price, or did it have to do with just the food choice, do you think? That's a lot, I know.
Well, I believe, and I think Stacy and Kathy would agree with me, and most of the vast majority of my colleagues would agree as well. We see some drops, small drops in participation due to price increases. However, the big drops are coming because of it's not what they want to eat.
Not what they want.
So, for example, we toyed with using Pizza Hut this year. Recognized name. Now, still a whole grain pizza, low sodium pizza, still has to meet the regulations. And we couldn't gain any traction with that either.
Yeah.
So and you'll hear things about share tables where kids want to put their fruits and vegetables and things on a table. Monroe County Health Department doesn't allow that.
Oh.
But also, if they're putting it on the table, they're not eating it.
Well,
so now essentially what we're doing is we're providing a 30-cent item that the children don't want to eat. And the problem is they're not required. Well, I don't think they should be required necessarily, but they're not, and so they're not eating it. So even though we have it out there, and even though they take it, so we spend the money on it, but they're not consuming it.
Thanks.
And I think too, Kathy's come up with some great soup recipes. I have been pushing her for the cheeseburger soup. But it's really not complicated. I don't think if I'll be happy to bring all of you soup that is made the way we would traditionally have made soup and the regulations. I will drive that to everybody's house if you would like. And you can taste the two differences in the soup. The cookie, for example, we're not advocating that we sell a child 15 cookies, but a cookie isn't driving the obesity problem. They're basically eating one meal with us. Potentially they eat 180 lunches with us out of 365 they could potentially consume with us. And if students are able to buy the things they want, I believe they're likely to buy a sub sandwich and a milk, or a sub sandwich and a Gatorade. And we're limited by silly things like I can't sell them certain size juices because it's too large. And it's not too large for any other reason than USDA has said it's too large. I understand that juice has sugar, but juice is still a good thing for you to drink.
Yeah.
Mark, I was just going to add too, is that we have some really talented staff that we really would love to be able to tap into their expertise. We found that out with the homemade soups, mid-year. So that was very enlightening and very encouraging, and they're very enthusiastic.
Well, I'll deviate with Kathy for just a moment there. I think we've known that we have very talented staff. We just haven't been able to turn them loose.
Right.
Correct.
We've got, once we did this year, and we came at it with, especially from the adult standpoint with the soups, we wanted to come up with soups that they want to eat. And we know we have a couple of really good cooks that have made their own soups for years. And when Kathy headed that project, when we turned them loose, they came up with phenomenal projects or phenomenal soups that people love. The students love the clam chowder that Kathy mentioned. We sold that to the kids. We got to the point where we couldn't keep enough of it. We couldn't make enough for the students. And that's not an item that's making anybody obese. It's a great product. We don't serve an extremely large portion of it. That they would rather eat, and it tastes good. And it's what they're used to eating at home. And I think that's a big piece, is if they were used to eating a certain way at home, then they would want to eat that way at school, but they don't.
So I have a couple comments on this. Number one, whatever you did this school year before the pandemic, my son's meal account, I had to put more money in. So clearly the small changes at Strader were making an impact on him. I'm because of the increase. And it's true, my children hate to buy school lunches since 2010. They couldn't stand having to pick a fruit and throw it out because they weren't going to consume it, and things looked funny. So I am all in favor of this because I think it will make a huge difference. I think we may see an increase. And also as a mom, it'd be nice if my kids would buy lunch once in a while so I don't have to make it for them. So I have that comment. But my question is, if this doesn't work out, can we go back to the program? Can we changed our mind and go back next year if something doesn't work?
Yep, yes, Linda, yep, yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, all right. Well, thank you. No, I'm excited. I think it would be I think it's worth giving a shot.
Thank you.
So Brian, is the risk that we lose the funding by going out of the program and we have to make that up with?
So, yeah, that's a great point, because we will lose some government commodities leaving the program. We'll lose the reimbursement, but we're throwing out some of the stuff like the apples that get thrown out. That's an expense that we no longer would have to incur. We're a lot of spoilage on things that aren't getting taken. So we could trim, we offset the revenue losses by trimming what we're actually buying and the waste that's coming through the line. So, we will lose some of that federal reimbursement revenue, some state revenue, and some commodity dollars. But I think it would be more than offset by the increase in participation.
So you'd expect to be better than net neutral?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
I fully support this program and the work that you've put into it behind it. It feels more entrepreneurial, and that's a great thing for kids to see and be part of. And I also appreciate the fact that students maybe would be more empowered to take control over what they're eating in a positive way. It should be a good experience. It's the middle of the day. They should be hungry. They should be eating. And all the ideas that we've seen implemented by Mark, by you and your staff, have been extremely positive and extremely delicious. So fully support this effort, including the aquaponics program. And I love the aspect that you're able to incorporate anything for families receiving meals and to donate so nothing goes to waste. So commend you for that as well.
Thank you very much. And I would also add, if I could, that if anybody would like to take a look at our website, we provide a wealth of information, nutritional information, health information, snack recipes, healthy snack recipes. And students have the ability right now to be able to go in and rate food, and we want to continue that. But they also have the ability to see product formulation statements, nutritional analysis, for items, and we will continue that in the future. So the kids that are tracking their calories, fat, etc., would be able to do that in the future as well. And parents have the ability to do that now also.
Does anyone else have any comments they'd like to add?
Yes, I do. So are there, even though we wouldn't be following the guidelines of the program that we're in now, would there be other guidelines that we'd be following?
So we will still follow the guidelines, the USDA's guidelines for middle and elementary schools. And then any other guidelines that we would follow for the high schools would be district specific. Okay,
but there would be guidelines.
Sure.
Yeah, Sue, we're not going to convert all 4 lines to chocolate cake Thursday.
I wasn't suggesting that, but I just want to make sure there's some kind of...
It sounds delicious, though.
Nutritional structure.
Yes, yeah. It really what we're looking to do is just kind of springboard back to pre-2010 with just more choice. Not to cliche, but I'm thinking of the subline I grew up with in the early 90s, where you got to pick all your stuff and add your toppings, and then I just wanted to grab 2 chocolate milks and be on my way, and have those selections.
What we're going for is more choice, more interactive. The concept that Kathy brought up, faux, that's something we had been working on all year, and we were just about we had started to roll it out. But that's where, again, you can take your toppings, you can choose your protein, your vegetables, yep. Nothing unhealthy about that. You can choose what broth you would like, and you build your own soup. But with the USDA regulations, we don't have the leeway and freedom to wheel and deal like that, because we have to know exactly what the nutritional makeup is of the final item when the student leaves the line. And there's just no way we would know what that, I couldn't tell you if they exceeded the calories. I couldn't tell you if we reached the calories based on what an individual student chooses. Because if they only choose, say, the broth, chicken, and snow peas, that's going to be very different than if somebody chooses the chicken broth, chicken, snow peas, and mushrooms, and broccoli, and olives, and And then all of a sudden the olives have salt on them, so our salt is out of whack.
Right.
So, you know, what we're really going
Olives
for
in
is,
soup?
pardon me?
People put olives in soup?
I'm kind of weird. I might.
Okay.
Sometimes I do that stuff just to see what it'll taste like.
Yeah, okay.
Not always happy with my choice, but I do find out what it tasted like. So we want the kids we want the students, I mean, we can see they're walking away from the program because they don't have the choice. They don't have the foods that they like. You know, pasta, for example, we used to be able to offer them a certain size dish and say, fill it as high as you want. You know, it wasn't a half a pound sized. It wasn't, 24 ounces of pasta, but the kids love the idea that, okay, I can put as much in here as I want and I'm not going to be charged anymore. It only holds a certain amount anyway. We've already factored that into the cost.
Mhm.
So if they eat that amount, fine. If they eat less, fine. But then they can choose. This year, for example, you mentioned your child eating at school more often. Well, one of the things I did when we decided to give a little more leeway to what we were doing is I said to my staff, we were audited last year. We're not going to be audited for another 3 years. So if they don't want to take a fruit or vegetable and they have a chicken sandwich and they have a milk and they have the 3 components that were required to have for a reimbursable meal, we're just gonna call it a lunch. We're not gonna force the fruit on them if they don't want it, and they're going to end up throwing it in the garbage and putting it on a table. And I think some of that helps with those kinds of things. Help with students wanting to come back to line because they don't feel like they're being lectured to and being bullied into taking something that they really don't want to take. And even if you explain it to them, they still don't understand why they're being forced to take it.
Right. In the
Okay.
interest of time, some more questions right, before moving on the agenda.
Thank you, guys. It was awesome. Thank you.
very much.
Thanks, Stacy and
Thank
Kat
you.
and Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Awesome.
It's awesome.
Thank you very much. And to the staff and security that support your efforts too.
Thank you.
Thank you for noticing that.
Good night.
Great night. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Done. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to the amendment of our current school calendar.
Okay, we'll make this quick because of all the things that have happened since March. We need the board to approve a modified school calendar that has the students' last day on June 15th and the teachers' last day on June 19th.
And everyone's had a chance to review that. Barring any questions, can we have a motion, please, to amend the school calendar? Mike Suff, second.
I'll make that motion.
Jan, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. This is easier when I could see everybody.
I know.
And finally, the agreement. Carmen, you want to speak to that? That's another brief business
Yeah.
item.
So we've discussed this during executive session, and I would need a motion to accept the agreement, and a second and a vote.
I'll make that motion.
As discussed. Okay, Sue, and second by Jan. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Moving on now to our consent agenda.
Nope.
Nope.
You need to do old business,
Oh, yeah.
the
Oh,
Board
I'm
of Education calendar for next year. This is a second reading, and so
The
I think we're all set.
Board of
But
Education calendar. Yes, we look forward to being able to get back to our normal way of conducting our meetings and workshops and hearing from all the different segments of the school district that we've missed doing this year. So knowing that all the dates are in place as best they can be, can we have a motion, please, to accept the second reading of the draft calendar?
So moved.
Oh, and a second.
Maria, second by Linda. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. And moving on to the consent agenda, recommending the approval of the resolution to appoint the acting clerk, chairperson, chief inspector, assistant clerks, and additional inspectors for the election and annual election and budget vote held via absentee ballot on June 9th, which everyone has received as well. Can we have a motion, please, to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
By Mike, second. Mike Suff. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that concludes our agenda as set. Just like to relay thank you to everyone for their continued efforts in this extraordinary circumstance that we're experiencing. And we all look forward to better days ahead and have confidence they will come. With that, any final comments by anyone? Can we have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Maria, second.
So
Mike
moved.
Stuff, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. I know this was lengthy. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks,
All.
everybody.
Visit the
Thanks.
website
Bye.
for voting instructions.
Yes.
Thanks,
Good night, everybody. Good night.
Good night.